So what I've given you here is a line, kind of a summary type thing of the first chapter. There is the first chapter, should you so choose. And the way I want to go through this book is it's very small, and so it doesn't take a whole lot of brain power to go through. But what we're going to do is, how about this? He's writing from a very Protestant background. And so some of the stuff, it's not really applicable to us. So what we're going to do is we're going to eat the meat, and we're going to spit the bones out. And what we're going to do in here is determine which is meat and which is bones for us. Yeah. So the way this starts out is he says, it's rarely stated, but in a large number of churches, the mentality of the lay people and the leadership, or the lay people, lay leadership, clergy, they all have the same mentality that they're satisfied with the status quo of their church. They're like, I know everyone here. I like everyone here. Why grow? If we grow, then we potentially will have to deal with the problems of a larger church. We'll have to worry about building our facilities bigger to house more people. We'll have to worry about the fact that we won't know everyone. We'll have to deal with, what are all the things he says? He goes through a bunch of them. But, since we're comfortable here, let's just keep it like here. He sets the number there about 145. He said, that's where people, we're averaging about 145 on a Sunday morning, and we've been here for years. And that's all our building will accommodate unless we go to 2 services, and nobody wants to do that, or unless we are enlarging the building, and what costs that would cost a lot of money. So why don't you just leave us alone? Or instead of talking about the church growing in numbers, why don't you just start adding more churches? Plant another one. We're just a good, comfortable size now, and we have a wonderful worship, and we're the right size that enables everyone to know everyone else. Everyone knows size produces anonymity. Why do you want to disturb us with all these ways that might increase church attendance? Why don't you try why should we try to become a bigger church and have to deal with all the problems confronting those big churches when we like it here? We're small enough for everyone to know everyone, but big enough for a full-scale program. And he says this is where most people kind of subconsciously are. He says for him, the most if you look at the United States, the most comfortable sized church, he says, is about 75 people. He says there you have people, there's enough that where everyone still knows everyone. They have enough that they can probably afford a full-time preacher, maybe C, maybe no. It says it's small enough for members to know and to care about each other, and sufficiently large for a meaningful worship experience. It's small enough that the time frame for planning can be comparatively short, but large, and also small enough that the internal communications for everyone is you don't have to wait a long thing. Go ahead.
That would be true if you have one service. If you have 2 services, you've started separating people and they don't know each other. Even
that is true.
Smaller congregation.
That is true. That is true. This is assuming that there is one size. There's one service is the word I'm looking for. All of this is true. So the problem with this is the difficulty in providing financial support for the long-term pastorate, and a difficulty in building and maintaining a meeting place. So it says most small congregations overcome these by finding a pastor with a spouse who has full-time employment as well. That way it kind of balances each other out. And relying on the way they get around the maintenance is they rely on the contributions of past generations, so they rely on their endowment. And they say, we're good. So the next most comfortable is based on is 135 to 160. It says there, it's still benefit of being relatively small. Again, probably one service, but now they can start thinking to offer about two different styles of worship. Think about First Baptist. They have their traditional service, and they now started doing a contemporary service in an entirely different building. And with ours, we have a said service and a sung service. If you like hymns, you go to first or second service. You don't like hymns, then you go to the first service. And so then they have the other things that they can offer: full-scale Christian education, attractive youth program, 1, 2, 3, or 4 choirs, a women's organization with 3 or 4 circles, and especially with some specialized classes and possibly a men's fellowship. And so and at that size, it normally has enough volunteers that it can kind of make the things happen. And then they have enough money normally to pass on 15% of all contributions to outreach, and enough new members to replace the 5 or 6% of all who disappear every year. And they have enough money to pay the bills without making money the top agenda at every meeting of the governing board. So it's interesting. And so these are the comfortable ones. And this one, the mentality would be, why grow? Because all growing does is produce more problems. Yeah.
But in reality, to replace 6% of the people is the constant growth.
Uh-huh.
Because you have to be bringing strangers in all the time, and if they're not recognizing that, they got a problem.
And even at our size, our last year being the outlier, our average Sunday attendance throughout my entire tenure here has been the same. So we've lost a good number of people. We've replaced them, and so we're kind of about the same.
5 years for the last 4 years, and this last year we lost 1.
Yeah, and some years we've had a lot, some years we've had a little, but we've replaced them. At least numbers wise, if not in our hearts, but numbers wise. So it's been about the same. Now he goes on to say the most persuasive argument against reading this book can be summarized with the 8 terrifying words. What if we try and it works? So because he says if you try and it doesn't work, then you just go back to the way it was. It would take a little bit, and then you just go back to the way things were, and you're like, well, we sure did try, and this is just who we are. But the problem is, with doing these things in here, what if we try and it works, then we're going to change, and that is terrifying to everyone. Because there's problems that you haven't dealt with before. That's the beauty of always being the same, is you already know the problems that you're going to have to do. Just like in vestries, we're like, well, we were the giving was up, and then they cratered, and we can always look back to next year, the last year, the year before, and the year before, and we can say, well, this is what it does in the summer. It goes down, and then it comes back up right before the end of the year, and we end on a nice, happy note.
Question. Who's it more terrifying for, the congregation or the priest?
Yes. It can be both.
Yeah. I think the congregation makes it more terrifying for the priest.
Right?
Change it. Growth's always hard.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anywhere you get it,
Yeah.
there's always pain that comes with it.
Because with growth comes change within the congregation, but it also a lot more change to the priest than what he has to do, and depending on his style and his outreach and whether he's visiting the members, I mean, that's a lot more work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you and that comes in, and then you get a lot more upset people, and so a lot more time in your office with frustrated people. Yeah, but that is so. But you can't prevent growing just because it will require more of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he goes on. He says, there are, of all the 44 ways that he suggested, they fall into two categories that are absolutely proven. The first one, he says, is just get the people who are already coming to come more often. That's a great way to increase your ASA, your average Sunday attendance, and not have to get any more people in, any more strangers in there. Please, sir. Is just get your people who are coming, thank you. If they're coming one Sunday a month, get them to come 2 Sundays a month. All of a sudden your ASA goes up, and you haven't done much other than getting people more active with what you're doing. Says, exactly, that is a good thing. And the other sorts of things are going out and getting new people. He says it's a both and process. You can't just do one at the expense of the other, because one, it's inflating numbers falsely. It looks good on an ASA, but you haven't done anything other than bring in the people that you currently have. Good thing.
But it's good for their souls.
Absolutely. It's exactly getting more people engaged. Good thing. Bringing in new people, also good things. Also, potential headaches with both, actually. More, yeah. They could have said, "Well, I didn't want to come because this thing always annoyed me, and so now I'm forced to deal with this annoyance, and now now we get to all deal with that together." Yeah. So exactly. So the reader should be warned that the few things of the in the world have the power of a new idea. This book was written for leaders in the local churches who share 6 convictions. So 1, that they are convinced that the power of God's word, and they are convinced that when people hear God's word preached, lives are changed. 2nd, they're convinced that by definition, Christians are called to come together to worship God and to share in the sacraments. I did not highlight the rest of that, or ordinances of the church, because I believe that they are sacraments, not ordinances. 3rd, they take literally and seriously the Great Commission, and feel compelled by the power of those words to follow that directive. 4th, they believe that every worshiping community should be actively engaged in confronting more and more people with the good news that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, and that their own local church is not exempt from that imperative. 5th, that they are venturesome, risk-taking persons who are willing, if not eager, to make the necessary changes to bring more people into that worshiping community of which they are members. And 6th, that they are willing to accept the role of agents of intentional change from within an organization. That's chapter 7. And understand that it always brings unanticipated consequences, discontinuity, and other threats to the status quo. So that is and then the rest of the chapter is just kind of breaking down the book. So before we go into chapter 1, that I didn't give you, I did give you chapter 1. Look at there. Yay. So I did give that to you. So before we go into that, thoughts about that?
About this?
About the intro so far.
I'm just thinking about things that I know work.
Mm-hmm.
And that is small house, what we call house churches or Bible studies.
Mm-hmm.
That way you pull new people in as they come into the church, and they get to know a small group of people first more intimately than just seeing people on a Sunday.
Kind of like what we would do with the Wednesday night group. There was a while where I would prefer that everyone come in on our Wednesday night Bible study. We would do mass, Bible study, and food, and that's just a much smaller group to get people. We learn people much faster that way. And all of a sudden they're, oh yeah, it showed up on Sundays. It was only natural progression. There's not this new person coming in, a person that's already been integrated, and they've taken a step. And by coming in on Sunday, you were just like, oh, well, I mean, good to see you on a Sunday now. No, I get to see you 2 days a week.
Well, it's just as simple as on a Sunday is a member of the church inviting them to come over and have coffee
Exactly.
But it's hard to break off into small groups in someone's home.
Right.
Unless you have the numbers for it.
Right.
Because if we have one at the house, we're gonna invite all of you sitting here,
Yeah. Right.
So,
Right.
so
Basically,
it's a
we
little
have the
bit
same
more
people in church
difficult.
in somebody.
Yeah.
But you're right, starting here at church
Mhm.
to connect that way and then spreading out.
Yeah.
Can be done.
We're made for community, like
Oh,
made
yeah,
by God
absolutely.
for
Yes.
community, and the example of the Trinity.
Yes,
And so drawing, when we draw together as community
yes.
in those small groups and an even larger community within that parish, that draws us into things
Right.
because that's how we're like made for that.
We're made to yearn for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. I mean, there's negatives and positives of growing.
Yes, there are.
Oh yeah.
I mean, growing pains is not just, two
Right.
simple words. They really do happen.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It with the status quo, you already know the sore points of where they are. Say okay, well, and the ways to work around that and say because this person is a part of our community, we know them, love them, but at times can't stand them, so we work around because we still love them.
Exactly.
And so that's
And
just
we're
like
used to 'em.
Exactly, and so that's the same thing as like a family reunion.
Yes.
Old Uncle Ted.
But that only works if you know them.
Right.
The thing of it is, if they're new and, a little pushy, and you don't know them, boy, that's a lot of friction right there.
The purpose is to get to know them though when
Yeah.
they're having, especially Bible study. It's
Mhm.
more
Yeah,
intimate
that's
that
what
way.
I'm saying, when you get to the small groups, you get to know them and they know you, and, like most people understand that I will say whatever I think's appropriate. But I do not mean to offend,
Right.
but I do at times, I know that. She tells me I do all the time.
And sometimes you do mean to do it.
Just in
Yeah,
case you missed
sometimes.
that off ramp, that one was the one you were looking for. And exactly, there's all sorts of things that and you can count on those things within a closed community.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter what the warts are, there are warts. No matter what the beauty places, there are beauty. And so we're used to them, and we know them. We either take them for granted and we take them for granted either way. Now, so going on with the chapter there. And I'll just kind of work us through this and stop me if something jumps out. It says some of the congregations carefully and regularly attend or record the attendance at Sunday morning worship. Others place a greater emphasis on the number of people attending Sunday school, while many congregations keep a record of both. When asked why they return Sunday after Sunday, the respondents to scores of surveys have given the same basic answer. I had such a good experience last Sunday that I wanted to come back. those questions about the worship attendance usually lift up one or both of two factors. First, this was a meaningful worship experience which spoke to the person in terms of that individual's religious needs. For many, a close second is that Sunday morning is not only a time for corporate worship of God, but also an opportunity to share joys, concerns, and fellowship with other Christians who together constitute a loving, supportive, hopeful, caring, forgiving, and sustaining covenant community. The second attraction is often more obvious and more widely shared in smaller congregations than in the larger ones, where only a handful of people can call them every other member by name. For many people, this is the unique characteristic of a small church, and it is distinctive and its distinctive reason for being. So it's just easier in a small congregation sometimes that to know everyone, and so you have the opportunity to make that community something that people come back and say, man, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to tell other people about that. The flip side of that is also very easy for the people to come in on that Sunday and feel outside of that, or come in and experience, since they're not used to all the blemishes and stuff like that. It's like, oh, that was just a bad. I didn't get that second one. Maybe the first was good. Maybe it wasn't good. It's one or both, or it's neither.
But in the Anglican Church, a person coming in from outside that was not Episcopal or Roman Catholic, maybe Lutheran, they're lost.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's got to be a way to help them through a service or two so that they get meaning out of it, are not confused.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna mention my second problem, but, you know.
Incense?
No, not incense.
Well, right. Well,
Hurts
and
my ears.
you get to the point where the problem with having a book is that we want to attach ourselves to that book. We want to be in the book. One of the things that I've done on occasion, when the Karen's group of friends, your same group of friends, come in. I'm like, look, if you get lost, don't try to find yourself. Don't worry about that. Just enjoy, let it wash over you, because rather than trying to stay,
Keep up.
trying to keep up, you're losing. All you're seeing is
You don't hear anything.
all you're seeing
because
is
you're
this.
worried about where you are and if you're.
Exactly. So there's one of probably three ways to combat that. One, give people the freedom to not feel tied to the book if they don't want to. Granted, if you're participating, you all have to say the same words in order for it to not be a cacophony of things and chaotic. So there's that. But for people to come in greater, they have to be able to know the style of worship, what to say when, and that's why we give them things. Or there's the opportunity of, like some churches, Christ the Redeemer, they put everything up on the wall. You sacrifice exactly. You look at that, and that's good for some. But in others, that's just like, you're like, that just kind of, it's too jarring. This 20th, 21st century technology as opposed to, this thing that's timeless in front of it. So there's that. And then the other one is to, place people next to people and say, Here's where we're going next. Here's where we're going next. I think that's the best way to say, here's where we're going. And
I think most people coming into a church do want to participate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I think you're right.
Most evangelical churches, there's no participation except singing.
Mm-hmm.
And that they'll have up on a screen.
Right.
Well, they mess the words up. But,
But I think
I'm
most
trying to
congr-
help people beside me, you know,
Yeah.
but it's not happening that often.
But most congregants are gonna do that.
Yeah.
If someone is new to you and they don't, you can tell.
Tell that they're
they're
struggling,
lost,
so
they're
you-
struggling, so
confused,
you try to
yeah.
help,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that screen, yeah, we did that one time, well, we did that, it took many years, but we finally, at St. George, they brought that screen in. And when it first rolled down, it's just like, oh
Right. It's hard to do it
no.
well.
No.
I think maybe the best way I've seen was actually not in a church, but it was in it was at the Santa Fe Opera. They had sub screens that come up on the chairs in front of you.
Oh, well, that's high tech.
Well, yeah, exactly. They have the money to do it, but that way you're not. If you want to know what they're saying, it's right there. But then you got to have someone to work the teleprompter and all the things. So again, change it means that someone else has to encourage that, because now all of a sudden you're like, well, we need to have people who are going to do this. So me, the priest, I can't say, okay, now that's where I am. Let's keep scrolling. So now someone else, and that's a good thing. Getting more people involved to say, I can run a mouse.
Would
Yeah.
would you then say that at the start of each service, if you see people that you know have never been there, to make the comment, our service is a very participatory service. If you can't keep up, it's fine, because we know it's very confusing at times. But we have a book, and if somebody beside you, they can help you. That way you're pulling them in at the start,
Right.
and they're not panicked that they can't keep up.
Right. And we had the opportunity to do that this morning, poor Justin. I saw you as I walked by. I was like, "Oh, he doesn't have a thing." And so, see,
I'm
it's
sorry, I didn't notice
It's
that.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll get. I was gonna ask you for one for the next service.
Yeah.
I'll participate.
Right, but-
I said my amen.
See, exactly.
That's where it
I'm
does
sorry, I
help to
didn't
have
realize
that.
you
Yeah.
didn't have it.
Yeah.
Because
I
you don't
was-
have to follow
I
the
was
book where you're
following
going
each
back
one
and
of these
forth or
men's
whatever. It's all
lead,
right.
and I was
Yeah,
following his
Yeah.
lead,
that's-
and you know what I
That
mean,
is,
just as much as
even though
possible.
it's taken me a while to
Yeah.
get used to
If you want
the
to-
service and the bulletin, because I was always a prayer
You showed me when
person.
to
Same.
kneel.
But
Same.
it
that's
is
a
certainly
start.
better for people coming
Yeah.
in. I
Do
mean,
that
that's a nightmare
because
trying
I
to.
know-
Yeah.
Trying to go back
Trying
and
to
forth.
follow
Yeah.
the prayer book.
You have to
and,
skip like 4 pages to get to the next
Yeah.
thing, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when
Most
there's
people do like what Justin did, if you want to be involved, then you're watching and looking,
Yeah.
and then you
Uh-huh.
it's how
you sort of
start.
infer that direction from everybody else.
Yes.
one of my favorite things is to figure out where people sit, and like.
Watch the new person supplant them.
Yeah.
And not share.
Like I like to sit. Like I like to sit in the front, because in the front you actually have a better view of what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the back, if you sit in the back, then you can see what's people are doing.
Yeah.
You get the rubrics a lot faster if you sit in the back.
Yeah.
You get the better experience the further up you sit. But then
the
you have
new
to
person-
rely.
The new person is more apt to sit in the back than they
Right.
are in the front.
Well, like on Wednesday, I sat up front, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, and you guided me through. You told,
Yeah.
you was very verbal about what what to do and stuff, because
Yeah.
you knew.
Right, exactly.
You knew I
Yeah,
had
I saw a
handle that.
bunch of people who hadn't been here. I'm like, let me
Yeah.
take 2 seconds and do a kind of a real quick pregame.
Yeah, exactly.
So in our altar book, in the old altar book, and in the new one too, there are that we're looking at, right? Because we have the same thing that you guys have in front of you, but there's in brackets it says the page number.
Yeah.
So when we shift from one thing to another, it used to be pretty common, and because we're not using the actual prayer books at the moment, it's not a big deal. But when we are only using the prayer books, continuing on page number 333
Yeah.
or whatever, that way people can orient themselves if they weren't really paying attention, or they're new and have no idea what we're doing. At least they know what page to turn to, and then they go, oh, here it is, I see what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, some people so previously to having the little what are called missalettes is we had two books, a red book and a blue book. The red book was the service, and then the blue book was the service music. So you can say, and continuing on page 355, or the service begins on page 323, 355 in your red book. That way, new people would be like, oh, I got red book right here.
Yeah. Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one here for me.
Yeah. So, and you know, there's ways to be able to include everyone, but yeah, like today I should have included a rubric about kneeling prior to the 10 Commandments. It's written in there.
It's written in there.
It's written in there. However, it's a tough transition from doing the introit to okay, now kneel.
As soon as you started reading it, I thought, oh, shouldn't I be kneeling? I looked out and everybody else was kneeling. I was like,
Yeah.
yep. I
Yeah.
One of the first. Jim's usually the first one. Well, he's the only one I can see. But yeah, he nailed it. I'm like, why is he kneeling? And then I read where it said kneel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes we even get lost. Even
Oh.
as many years as we've been.
Yeah. When in
So,
doubt.
so if you want to know what's going to happen or about to happen, there's what we call rubrics. The cursive, or not cursive, but the italic notes is a description of here's what's going on, and here's what the priest is going to say, and then it says if the people are going to say something back, then it says all of that.
And we have little the same thing up there that says, "All right, do this, dummy."
There you go.
Yeah, that way.
Or to remind us to do it.
Yeah, if all else fails.
You know, one thing that was always is having it memorized. You know, that you don't, people that don't even have to look at anything, you know, which was me before we changed.
Before we changed.
It's a
And
hard
then
change.
I've got some of it memorized, but then you start reading some of the.
It's
You start
just
getting
a
some
little bit
mix
off.
the two of them
Yeah.
together,
I
and
get a little,
mix
I
the
get
two
a little
together.
confused. I still go on and want to say something, but I think it's harder if you're that way, been there a long time, and you know what it is, to even sometimes realize it's somebody else's.
You
Right.
ought to be some of us who bounce between three congregations where we use the Missal and 28 prayer book, the 2019 prayer book in contemporary language, and then 79 prayer book right one. Like, I don't know what I'm saying.
I did that. I did that in one congregation every Sunday prior to coming
That's
here.
rough.
We normally did 28 right 2 right 1 every single Sunday, and the Saturday we had a Saturday night vigil, and that one was almost dealer's choice about what it was. The more you change, and the more you change what the people say, the harder it is to get them back into the.
I still
yeah.
to this day will start spilling off the old way.
I do the same thing.
Some of the prayers.
Become these and thous and.
You know, and you notice when I'm giving out communion, it's in right 1, because that's what I memorized, and that's what it's going to be until the day I die.
I was going to say, I'd probably drive Mike crazy because I'm standing right behind him for some of the prayers, and I'm still going back to some of the other stuff. And Mike's probably listening. What is he saying?
It's okay. Father Jeff and I do it to each other all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be speaking where everybody else is listening, and then one of us will say the old way, and it just throws us off. We're like,
So there's a contemporary version where you're used to the way it sounds, but then there's another one that the older language, these, thys, stuff like that, that if Christianity had a language of prayer, it would be essentially the old style, like
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Christianity actually is one of the few religions that doesn't have a language of prayer. Islam, they're all these and thys, essentially a more archaic, not Aramaic, Arabic. Yeah. So they have that. Jews have that. The Hebrew, these are the words on the page, and those are the words on the page. And so when we're going to preach in whatever the language is of the people. When we're going to pray these words like they're written.
oh, there's a difference in the same in the Latin Mass.
Uh-huh.
The Mass was said in Latin. The sermon was not in Latin. The sermon was whatever the common tongue is. Same theory.
So now, in order to bridge these gaps here, it says there are a number of different, and I'm just kind of jumping here. It says there are a number of different ways to help people who are new to the congregation. It says, one, offer a note of hope. You know, some people doom and gloom. You know, and I've heard another one. You know, that's just you're too fire and brimstone. You know, we need that occasionally to shake us up, but we don't need that every Sunday because we're redeemed, or however you want to say it. It says, perhaps the most common characteristic of the churches that are attracting increasing numbers of people today, and today, by the way, is 1988, is that not where the minister is on the theological spectrum or the denominational affiliation, but on whether people hear and feel during the worship experience. This is a note of hope. Mm-hmm. So if you're saying, you know, you can be a better person, you know, God, you know, Jesus Christ had come to save you and me, and you know, we're all in this together. You know, yeah. Sometimes it's a good idea to have that in people, because you know, I can go anywhere to feel bad about myself. You know, the world wants me to feel bad about myself. Church should be, and in the places that are growing, it is a place where you're being told that you can better yourself. This is where you come to feel like you're right. There's nuances.
Yeah, who's the clown down in Houston?
Oh yeah,
Joel Osteen.
Yeah, so it could go. Thank you, to the extent of the prosperity gospel, but that I think is taking it too far.
Yeah.
That you know, again, we have a little spectrum here of doom and gloom to, you know, Jesus blesses you financially, and that's how your financial wealth is proof of your blessedness by God. It's like, well, somewhere there's probably a little further, a little closer on the spectrum to the right than it is to the left.
You know, I agree that he has blessed me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not what I was looking for.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I
Exactly.
don't know if that makes sense or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
I just,
Because
every
we
time I
don't know,
watch,
we just think we know what's good for us. We don't really know what's good for us.
And all that's hindsight.
Right.
After he's done it, oh, okay.
Well, to me, the fact is, there's people that like liturgical worship. There's people that do not like liturgical worship. I mean, we've had a lot of priests over the years. Some of them have been great preachers, and some of them haven't been that great preacher. But I get what I get mostly out of the liturgy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Exactly.
But there's people that can't and will never like that type of worship. So, I mean, I don't know what we could do to win those people over, and that's a lot of people.
But sometimes I think that's the reason the Lord's created a lot of denominations, because there is a variety in the sense of there's only one Lord, but you can worship Him in a variety of ways.
Absolutely.
I don't know how, you know.
I think there's.
Were you talking about that on Wednesday night? How it really doesn't matter how you worship so much as remembering that we all believe Jesus is our Lord and Savior.
amen.
Yeah.
You know, so when you talk about a big C or a little c, what?
Ultimately, you will. So you have varying degrees of. My buddy puts it a good way. He says you have the light of Christ, his flashlight in this case. You know, some people when they're going out, they have, you know, big, huge, million candle power lights. They can see a lot. You know, you go through and you know, all the things are just really visible to them. And then you have some people that they have just that little candle or the little thing that they can just see a little bit, and you can always give them a bigger flashlight to allow them to see more. Some people just want to see, no, this is plenty of light for me. I just got this, and so you can step people up, but you have to first recognize that they're also what I think it was John Paul II said, the fellow Christians, you recognize that you are fellow travelers, and so we'll work with you on whatever that is. But first, you have to realize that you possess the light of Christ, and then we can quibble about all these other things. How having a bigger candle is better than having a little smaller candle, and all of that, and all of the candles used in the midst of worship, of course.
But I think Gail's like I am. I like communion, and if I don't get that, I don't feel like I've been to church.
Uh-huh.
When I've gone to evangelical churches, I feel like I've gone to a prayer and praise meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice,
Right.
and all that, but it's not complete. It's just a prayer and praise meeting on a Wednesday night. It's not church.
Right. So now,
So I mean, but I'm sure there's others that think they've gone overboard in what they believe, and I don't believe what they believe.
right.
But I'm very happy with this prayer and praise.
So I think good can come out of it. I think God. I don't think denominations are actually the best solution, but it is a solution that we have. So there's no point in and because eventually all these divisions will cease.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any denominations in heaven.
That's right. That's right. So eventually we'll get to that point, but on the road right now, the goal is to say, okay, well, let me allow. I realize that this is a valid expression for the most part. I can see in you the light of Christ, and then what we can do is say, okay, well, let me give you a bigger candle, and so to help that, and they can say, well, let me show you how to adorn your candle better or whatever. So so that I think it's too far if we go to say that we have the only answers, but I would say that we have the best answer. But and in all this is, as long as our what we're doing is offering that message of hope, then he would say, then we're doing a good job. If he says, when asked what he preached, one Presbyterian minister who has seen his attendance quadruple in 14 years replied, "I tried to get my people to get from Sunday morning to at least Friday. I offer them a note of help. I keep telling them God created this world and he is still at work in his world. He hasn't given up on us, and we should be able to have faith in him. In very simple terms, this is the most important single factor in increasing worship attendance, is to present the good news as good news. And the idea that the Christian faith offers hope and attracts people who have hope was a dominant characteristic of New Testament churches. One theme that is common to churches that are attracting more people is the theme of hope. And we go on and says, the negative side of the same point has been illustrated repeatedly of self-fulfilling prophecies expressed in the Anglo interchurch congregations founded in the 19th century, or in small rural church, when nearly every Sunday brought a reaffirmation message. Within a few years, this church will close. It's hard to, So if your main question is, or your main message on Sunday is, well, we're going to close in a couple years. Exactly. It's like, yeah. So
Oh, goody.
occasionally it's good to hear, if we continue on this time, the result is we're going to close. So let's change it. that's fine. Occasionally, but if that's what you're gonna do, it's like, well, let's go ahead
all
and
you're
close up the
running on.
tent. Yeah, let's just go ahead and close up tent and shop here, and we'll go on to the next thing.
That's kind of why we had to try to keep the positive attitude all these years when we've been in this lawsuit and all this stuff. I mean, you just couldn't stop just
Still.
because.
Thank God that lawsuit's over with.
Yeah, there's a number of congregations that just tried to come as best as they could to a halt. They're like, well, let's just, this is only going to be 1 to 2, 3 years process at the top. So let's just at the top. So let's just not do anything.
Don't spend any money because
Yep.
they're gonna,
Yeah.
gonna take it over anyway.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yep.
But I think we developed a fairly healthy early relationship early on when we're like, no, let's with the organ. No, we're going to put money into the organ, and if we have to give to somebody else, then they're going to have a good organ.
The stained glass.
Stained glass. There's all sorts of things. And no, this is a place that no matter what happens, this place will be here, and we will be good stewards of it. So.
But Bishop Hiker was good at keeping it,
Yes.
trying to keep it positive, even though I know probably sometime in his heart, he was, it was a tough job for him to do. but-
Amen to that. Yeah. So the next
But
thing
you could
that,
hear the relief in him when
Oh, yeah.
there was a positive thing.
Yeah.
You could see when he printed something out, it was like,
Yeah.
oh boy, he's relieved.
so the next thing that church can do to increase the worship experience, and this is what he's saying, is start with the worship experience. So 1, make sure you're preaching the good news as good news. Number 2, enhance the quality of the preaching. So that
Okay.
that one is very much you look at
He
the
says with
preaching.
everyone staring at him.
Exactly. I would think that I've done that by bringing in help.
I was gonna say, now we have 2 preachers.
Exactly.
So you get
And so
a variety.
that,
And that in itself is not a bad thing.
exactly, Father
Well,
Hightower.
I think you have over the last couple of years that you've gone from teaching to preaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
And that's a big change.
Yeah.
But he's
that-
always been a teacher.
Yes.
I know
you're
that's
a
your
great
love,
teacher.
that's your
Right.
first love, and I know
Right.
that.
It's
But
a great teacher,
It's
but-
important behind the pulpit, I
Yeah.
think, to not always
Yeah.
be
But-
so much the teacher, but,
And
and
that just
he
grows.
has improved and
Yeah.
Yes.
in that.
And
Absolutely.
It's improving all the time to me.
Yeah.
But it's also you getting used to the congregation from the beginning, you start to see who they are, what they need, and
Right.
then that's just a natural growth.
yeah. and-
So, don't beat yourself up. I've loved this since the
Absolutely
beginning.
not.
That's all right,
Well, no,
we'll
I-
beat you up.
Exactly. Well, and that's one of the things that a preacher can never be content with his preaching abilities. You always have to learn about how to do it better, or be constantly reading, or like Father Hightower said, bringing in a guest preacher is never a bad idea, because either they will do well, and your congregation will say, "Oh man, what a great preacher," and you can say, "Only the best for you." Only the best
Or
for
they
you.
do badly.
Or they do
Make
poor-
you really look good.
Exactly. Or they do poorly and you come out smelling like a rose.
That's a
Either
win-win
way,
situation
it's
right there.
never a bad thing.
That's awesome.
And I always tell Father Staffkey, I enjoy listening to him preach. Especially because that means I'm not preaching. So I get to listen and I'm like, oh, I like what he did there. So I can incorporate that. So,
Uh-oh, we're talking about
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, gotta stop talking.
So the next thing was enhance the quality of preaching. And, so I was like, and I believe I have done this. But yeah, it's, that someone can be, yes.
I'd like to say
I just
something.
wanted to.
Go ahead.
Something was on before you were talking about negative and positive. For some reason I was thinking that since that ice storm,
Mm-hmm.
I've been here, come back a couple of times, and I haven't heard one negative thing come out of this place.
Well, that's
It's all been positive, and it would be real easy to be negative with all that going on, But I'm just wanted to say that it's something I needed.
Amen.
On the right track.
Well, that's good.
Thank you for
Amen.
letting us know.
I can't say thank you enough, and so, I mean, anything to show my gratification, gratitude for everything that y'all have done, you know, I mean, welcoming me in and making me, I mean, I've never felt more accepted and more at home than, you know what I mean?
Yeah, see,
Honestly.
exactly.
Honestly, I can honestly say that. I mean, my great grandfather was a Free Will Baptist preacher. I told you about that, and I actually baptized him when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and it was so far away from where we lived. I attended Crossroads Cathedral, which was a non-denominational, and I just it was one of them. It was a large. It's real well known. I mean, it's a large. I mean, it's not so much anymore, but it was when I was going there. It was a very, very large church. But anyway, like I said, either one of them. I've never felt so accepted, and so you know, I mean, like I said, like at home here.
We're glad
I
you're
just
here.
want to thank. Yeah, I just want
Yes.
to.
Exactly.
Honestly, I just want to thank y'all from the bottom of my heart. I mean,
You're
honestly,
welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you for being here.
honestly.
Get it?
yeah, exactly. It's good. It's
We're small but mighty.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And most of us are good people.
Dave, I was gonna talk to you about that.
Yeah, I know. Oh, heavy sigh.
Yeah.
And so the next thing it says is exactly what we've just done. Schedule more preachers. More, you're just hearing more people presented a different way, because any preacher who thinks that he has the only way that people are going to listen to the message is just being too selfish, and his pride has gotten a hold of him, and say, no, I bet you that someone else could preach the message better than you can, even as good as you are. So you can always learn something if you're willing to learn.
Yeah,
They got out of the priesthood.
Father Guptill.
Bring him back.
Yeah, I know, he's good.
That guy's a preacher.
He's good.
I was going to say, I know a preacher, a Methodist preacher, Jay. He used a lot of gimmicks, and to me, I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes, though, things like that are used to it catches people's attention.
Yeah, but
You know?
he grew his church to 500 people.
Right.
But
No. Now the next
I
thing.
get on him a lot.
Right.
If you want to see something different in terms of approach, watch the sermon, because you guys won't be here, but watch the sermon at 10:30 and see how it is different from the way I did it at 8 o'clock. Because there will be some significant differences.
Really?
And it,
Because of the people who
No.
sit in the pews, or because you wanna change it?
No,
wants to
it's
take a
how I
risk.
wrote my sermon.
Oh,
But
okay.
there's certain things I can do with the 8 o'clock parishioners that I can do differently with the 10:30. And you'll have to watch to see what I mean.
I am gonna watch.
Right.
Or you
See?
could stay for a second, but
You've got
you know.
my curiosity.
He's a son, man.
Every time I gave a presentation, I only used notes, and so it was never the same.
And I write a narrative sermon every time,
Oh,
but it is never. And those who are at the two different masses will attest that it is fundamentally the same sermon, but it's not exactly the same sermon, because even though it's all written out, I don't necessarily follow, and you can see from my eye contact that I'm not reading it in most cases. I'm following along, but because I sort of do what the Holy Spirit leads me to do,
Yes.
it is different sometimes, and many times.
Cause you might have a thought that you didn't think of before.
Right.
At the first sermon. Okay.
What do you mean by gimmicks? Like, what is, I don't understand, how would, for example?
when I gave presentations,
No, I mean.
No, you're talking
The-
about
the
the
gimmicks
Jay-
with-
you're
So
talking about Jay.
yeah,
a priest friend of mine.
uh,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
he may pass the candy bar around the service and see who eats it and doesn't eat.
Bring in
Told
props.
everybody to take their shoes off and leave them. Then
Or
he
like
gave
the
them to
time,
the
or like the
Something like
time he had you
that.
in the audience.
Yeah, I went to the Methodist church, he had me interrupt him.
Not
And no
not
one knew
multiple
Jim.
times.
Yeah, multiple
know.
times. He, at one point, he said,
Run out of
you all
service,
are sinners. And I stood up and said, are you calling me a sinner? I almost got thrown out of that church.
She said, don't you want to come with me? I said, no way. I'm not going to the same
I don't know you.
Uh-uh.
But anyway,
Yeah.
it
Nobody
was set
spoke to you
up,
after
but,
either.
yeah, they did. Only one person really spoke to me after the service.
Oh,
And I interrupted him 2 or 3 times, and he explained
who's
it at
the
the end
devil
that
sitting there?
that was planned, but
It didn't matter.
they weren't
You'd upset the
happy.
apple cart.
Anyway, sorry, Father.
Oh, no worries. He says the next thing to do about the worship experience is change the pace. Here it says one of the most common reasons given by church members, this is on page 32, is when asked why they attend worship only infrequently, is it's boring. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to teach us what all was going on when, and to add more to what's going on visually. Is so you look and say, there's never. I tried to cut the fat as best we could, because there's always something going on, and if nothing else, if you look up from the book, there is something going on always to try to cut down on that boredom. But nothing is, I think, more boring than listen to someone preach for 45 minutes. But that's just me. But then again, I love liturgy. So I love a 3-hour mass, but I don't like a 45-minute sermon. So, because there's always something going on. In the midst of it, you got to stand up, you got to kneel, you got to sit, you got to, there's all sorts of things that you're doing in the midst of it.
But I have people that hate that.
Yeah, exactly.
Come to funerals here or something. I don't get all that getting up, getting down, getting up, getting
Yeah,
down.
stand up, sit down, stand
I
up.
do.
That's what it was referred to as, whenever I was growing up, they're like, well, but
But you don't
after attending and
understand.
stuff, it kind of
They
suits
don't
me.
understand.
Right, it's incorporating more of you in it.
I've
Yeah.
never been bored that I can ever remember in a service, for the sheer reason I'll hit a word and you're gone, and I'm still on that word contemplating on what something struck me about it or something, or a phrase. And,
I've never been bored either. I mean,
and I can catch up when I need to respond, but, that's the reason I like your ending prayer, my thoughts have been going on for,
Yes, and that's I have never in my entire life, I think, had someone start pointing at their watch during the Mass. During the sermon, people point at their watch during the sermon and be like, you're still good? Yeah. I've never seen anyone look at their watch during the Mass. And that's why I think that the Mass is, it strikes a different chord than just sitting there and listening to
back
it.
to us most of the time.
Yeah, on purpose.
Yeah, we're all
on
looking at each
purpose.
other.
So I can't see you do that.
I guess because there's so many parts to the service, from
It's always,
reading of the lessons to the Psalms to the gospel to the preaching to to the announcements to it moves with meaning to me. But I mean, I understand why other people would have problems.
Pretty much the longest mass that we have, liturgically speaking, is Easter Vigil.
Yes.
That is pretty much the longest one, and I have seen it go up to 3 hours.
I love
It
that
has here.
service.
And you've got a bunch of lessons and a bunch of collects, sung collects usually, and you have everything that starts at the beginning. You have that, which there's 9 of those, right, as opposed to the 3, including the gospel, right, and then you have and then there are other things, right. There's probably a baptism or 2 or 5 or whatever, hopefully.
yeah,
So it is by and far.
We love
Oh, I love it too.
my
absolute favorite.
How does, speaking of baptisms, how do y'all do that here?
We do it sprinkling, But it's just, I think actually the symbolism that we understand in baptismal regeneration is actually deeper when it's full immersion. But we sprinkle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How often do you offer that? And is there any kind of like, how long do you need to be a member here?
So within our denomination, there's the one you're once for always, because we believe that there is a change in you such that you can't ever repeat it. You're either baptized or you're not baptized, and once you're baptized, you can never again say that you're not baptized.
Absolutely.
So like when someone gets married, they never get to go back to saying that they are unmarried. They always have to say, well, something has changed in me such that I cannot refer to myself as simply unmarried.
Wow.
Yeah, so that there's a ontological shift in you, a shift in your isness. Who you are, yeah, and your being, isness, exactly, and so that you were forever that person afterward, good or bad. You were either a good person, so at that point, I am either a good baptized Christian or I'm a bad baptized Christian, but I'm always a baptized Christian. And so that, we only do that once. We have reaffirmations that happen that you can do at any point. Say, I'm taking this on again if I've lapsed and I feel the need to do that. So there's a reaffirmation, or there's the further acceptance of it, which is confirmation, saying all those things that were promised on my behalf, I am now taking them on fully for myself. And we
do infant baptizing.
Yeah.
So.
Infant
baptizing. So then that's what confirmation, and when they get to be of an age where they can decide, then they have confirmation.
I was thinking infinite.
Oh yeah,
that too. But
right.
Well, that too. Yeah, exactly.
So that's how that works.
Well, how would you? What would you suggest for me? Like I said, I was baptized by my great grandfather, Free Will Baptist. At about 6 or 7 years old, I didn't, that young, I didn't fully understand what I was promising and what I was, you know what I mean?
Right.
Now as an adult, being more aware of what it means and everything like that. So, what would you suggest? Also being
right. It's a confirmation class is what that would be.
I already see things as I don't the separate denominations. I don't really.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like it's one church to me. Like it's there's one God, and so there,
Yeah. Yeah. For the next step would be confirmation class, so you can go deeper in what you already know. But the way we approach baptism is the same way that circumcision was approached in the Old Testament. You get it done on the 8th day, whether you want to or not. No one asked a baby, "Hey, do you mind if I do this to you?" They just did it, and then you have your bar mitzvah when you're 13. Say, "Now that which was done to me, I now accept on myself. Now I'm circumcising my heart, as opposed to circumcising myself." So it's basically the same thing. So on that note, though, we're going to pause, because if not, I'll go all day. So we're going to pause here and just kind of read through the chapter as over the next week, and come back with anything that we feel is good, bad, and different. And we'll pick it up next time.